with Sarah Bils. Sarah Bils is independent journalist and U.S. Navy veteran and co-founder of DD Geopolitics, also doing great work. I was going to let you get yourself situated before I brought you on. Yesterday, when I had Margaret Kimberly on, I brought Margaret Kimberly on immediately, and she was like still fixing her. She was like, "Oh my God, I'm fixing my face."
I've given up. It's 5:00 in the morning, so we're here. We're ready to go. We're good.
How you doing today? You doing all right?
I'm disheveled, but I'm good. How are you?
I am doing fine. You look perfectly fine. You don't look disheveled. You seem
out of bed. I hope that the chat's okay with it. Let's go.
You're perfectly fine. You're perfectly fine. Thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate it. I've been following your content. You've been doing really great work covering this issue and other issues that have been taking place around the globe. And so I definitely wanted to talk to you about what has been taking place. From your point of view, why wasn't Assad more reactive? I've heard different reasons for this. And if you go to 10 different channels, you hear 10 different reasons. Everything from...
he still hasn't released a statement.
I think...
Well,
that's kind of my point, right? Yeah. His country is under attack.
Yeah.
And he's numb. He doesn't say squat.
It's super peculiar. He's a very peculiar leader. He's very aloof. He avoids making public statements, and he avoids making drastic moves. And that's just the kind of leader that he's always been. There's also been swirling rumors, the after the fact kind of Monday morning quarterbacking. I'm saying that maybe he was told not to, or he possibly Turkey, or he was sold out. There's plenty of rumors swirling, the whole selling out thing. I just don't know if I really buy that. I think that this was talked about maybe last week in Russia. I hate to put Russia under the bus, but I don't care. In the spirit of truth, I think that he was spoken to last week with Russia. Assad has been unwilling to play ball with the Americans, understandably so, and with the Turks, also understandably so. But Russia may have stepped in and finally said, "You know what, guy, like, you either have to come to the table or this is kind of what's going to happen." And and in Assad's credit, he didn't go to the table to negotiate the loss of his land or to capitulate to Turkey, because it was Turkey's kind of pushing. And then up until the very last minute, the United States was giving him offers of basically cut off the road to Hezbollah, and we will lift your sanctions, and this will kind of all end. And this was before the actual invasion or revolution started, and he declined. So maybe based on principle, he could have also seen, like, all right, the time is up. Like, it's clear. I mean, 13 years. Obviously, there was some incompetence happening, some corruption happening, and you're under a crippling sanctions regime. At some point, you have to say, all right, we don't really.
So you think he might have just said, "I'm done. I'm an eye doctor. I will about this life."
If he got to say it, but somebody might have convinced him to kind of say it. Yeah.
Because apparently he's gone back to ophthalmology in Moscow.
That's the rumor. I still can't find a verification on that. But I mean, his wife is sick. His kids are graduating college. I mean, this is still a regular person. People think like leaders, they just want to lead forever. But he never was meant to lead. He never wanted to lead. Even in the beginning, his mother complained that he was weak and too soft on the people. He never wanted to lead. So maybe she's the reason for the mess we're in. But he never wanted to lead, I don't think. And nothing ever, the way that he acted during his reign, nothing was ever indicative of him really being a power-hungry, wanting to lead person.
Well, he did cling to power like grim death. I mean, in 2015, I mean, like he hung, I mean, they had taken the majority of the territory. He clung to power. Like, he just would not let up. And I think that's why people are confused now. Because they look back at 2015 and they're like, okay, he fought like hell in 2015 in order to hold the line. And now his military just disintegrated. I mean, like, go ahead. You're about to say something.
We're finding different stuff from the military. So one military member, I mean, obviously I was in the military. I know like rumors just kind of swirl, but the military is saying we were told to stand down. So we were told to surrender. A lot of them left and went home to go protect their actual like home villages, like homelands and families and stuff. But I was watching a video yesterday, and he said, they sold us out, and we were told to stand down, which I think seems pretty accurate. I think that they were told to stand down, at least in the beginning, and then I've also been told that there was a huge, and Kevork will probably vouch for this, there was a huge information campaign inside of the country that was actually scaring the soldiers that were further back behind the lines, that were like, everybody's abandoning posts. So eventually you're like, well, I'm not going to fight this horde that's coming to chop my head off. I'm going to get the hell out of here.
Yeah, I mean, there was so much going on at the exact same time. Like, I mean, there was so much information. Like, in one sense, you get the military saying, hey, we're still fighting. We're there. Don't leave. And then in another sense, you see people just walking away. Or you see people in their vehicles driving away. And let's be clear, this was not like they were fighting a band of rebels. They were fighting a proper army. Yeah. I mean, these guys had like Western weapon systems, drones, tanks. I mean, like, this is not like men in cut off jeans with holes in them.
They were better equipped than the separatists and the Russian-backed separatists in the Donbass.
Right. Yes.
I saw the video, I said, look at this Uyghur, because obviously they're from China and Uzbek and stuff. And then, but for me, like, most people get caught up in the moment, and I'm like looking at the kit. I'm like, how does he have an American hat, an American rifle? He's got Turkish fatigues. Like, I was like, guys, look at what's going on. He's literally like basically like a race car driver. He had all of his sponsors on him.
Here's all my sponsors.
I would run too. Like, I'm a Syrian army troop. I have no money. I'm getting paid $40 a month. My kit is like from the Soviet Union. Of course I'm going to run.
It's very possible that they were paid. That's the other thought, right? That they are dirt poor. There's corruption that's endemic in the country. From my understanding, Russia had pushed Assad to make reforms. He wouldn't do it. He had been warned apparently for months. I mean, Kevork, when he was on the show, he pointed out, he was like, dude, I knew about this for months. I had been warning that this was going to happen for months. And my first question was, okay, well, why didn't they know? Like, how? And come to find out, they did know. And apparently they were telling him. Either they wasn't responsive, either he didn't want to play ball. I don't know what it was. I guess this is one of those things we're going to find out after the fact. From Russia's point of view, where do you think they stand on this? I remember the meeting with Lavrov. Lavrov left that meeting pissed off in Doha. And in talking to Ritter, there were two things that were pointed out. The first time around, the Astana process was basically an ultimatum to Erdogan. It basically like, look, you're going to sign this. And calling him to Moscow, showing him pictures of Ottoman defeats, like basically a humiliating deal for him to accept. And so the first opportunity he was able to get a power imbalance, he took the opportunity with that power imbalance to affect items on the ground, working with Israel and the US to do so. There's that thought. The other, because when I pointed out to Scott, I said, Erdogan stabbed Putin in his liver. And he was like, he didn't stab him in the liver. And he like exploded. He was like, would you, if you were forced to accept the deal in humiliation.
So much cope from Scott Ritter. Listen, I was dooming up until a point. I do think that this leaves Russia with egg on their face for sure. Just like you said, after that Doha agreement, it looked like Erdogan. Now I'm looking back in hindsight. I'm like, Erdogan was in the driver's seat this whole time. But I doomed, and I was like, this is a loss. Like, Russia has lost to NATO. I was like freaking out. And then I waited a few days, and now I'm looking and I'm like, Russia is actually kind of not, I wouldn't say they won, but they actually might come up with a net positive. And speaking to people, we have obviously.
Wait, you mean with Syria falling?
Yes, because they're no longer spread throughout the country. They no longer have to fight terrorism. The only thing that they are responsible for is the two bases that belong to them. That's it. That's not a bad thing. Yeah, it's an egg on your face, and it's a loss in terms of like pride
But isn't that at the behest of Turkey at this point, though? Meaning, aren't those military bases there at Turkey's leisure?
For now, but what about the situation in Ukraine? That's at Russia's leisure. Do you know, like Turkey has interest in Ukraine too. So I think the balancing act will be found there. I'm not super stoked about the turn of events. I'm just kind of trying to make lemonade out of lemons. I also was like, this is what Russia has now lost in Syria, and they have to a degree. But if they hold on to these ports, then really what was the huge loss? The bragging rights of being like, we have Wagner and soldiers taking care of Syria.
I mean, like, Syria is a stepping ground to Iran. I mean, if you think of Wesley Clark for the moment, where Wesley Clark was
Iran
pointing
lost. I think Iran has lost. I think
oh, yeah, big time. And if you're looking at a U.S. government that is coming in that seems to be squaring up against Iran, you're looking at a terrorist group that doesn't necessarily, see differences in a good light. And you're looking at Israel, who at this point thinks feeling somewhat ebullient at this turn of event. There was a picture of an Israeli sitting there watching Syria fall while masturbating. Like,
wait,
that
what?
stuff. He was touching himself.
Oh, the one where he was sitting outside.
Oh, that was so disgusting.
I don't.
But that's what I mean, right? Like, Israel at this point is feeling itself. It's we've been able to, at the very they lost. I would argue they lost a fighting draw to Hezbollah in that sense, at the very least, in southern Lebanon. Overall, Hezbollah has been decapitated on some level, and so it's like the front line for Iran has been broken in many respects. Gaza,
they're the biggest loser in this.
Yeah, big time. Gaza has been isolated. The West Bank is going to get annexed. I have no idea what is going to happen to the people in the West Bank, or for that matter, Gaza, when those get annexed. And Iran has to realize we're next. Like, if you listen to Wesley Clark's list, all of those countries have fallen, with Iran being that last one that's on that list. Do you think this is going to push Iran to get nuclear weapons?
Yes, I do. I actually think this will spill over into Iraq before it spills over into Iran. And talking to people on the ground in Iraq, and talking to people at the border, they're basically saying this looks like 2014 all over again, which is horrifying. The Kurds in the region have kind of isolated and insulated themselves. They're incredibly strong. The Kurds in Iraq are incredibly strong and very isolated, so they're able to do that. But the rest of the country is kind of at the whim of what happens. Iraq is still a majority Shia. So when places are majority Shia, read that as the rumor mill will say that are under Iranian influence.
Right.
Automatically.
Right.
So, right. Even though they've been majority Shia since the Gulf War, regardless, that's an issue. So that'll be seen as Iranian influence. So now I think that the idea is to push Iranian influence completely out. I think that might, now that we're talking about it and discussing, that might have pissed off Lavrov because he loves Iran. Mm-hmm. But Iran got pushed out of the region, period. They'll have to go back into a period of self-imposed isolation. And I mean, that's to a certain degree, that's their own fault.
Wait, why do you think it's their own fault?
Because where's True Promise 3 that we've waited 6 months for?
Well, that is a damn good question. Where
That's is the thing. Like, you want deterrence, you have to create it. Words can only deter people for so long until they say, you want to know what? I'm going to poke the bear and see what these words are made of, and they find out that they're nothing.
Why do you think they have been so hesitant in this case? I mean, Israel has been on a killing spree, like a literal murder spree, for the last year, with zero issue doing so. Like, no soul searching, none of that. Just, we are going to kill and kill and kill. We are going to be in rivers of blood. They're going to remember us. And they went through with it without any issue, any morality, just pure sociopaths. Iran has been threatening and still threatening without making any necessarily True Promise 3, right? Especially that would have came in handy during the time where Hezbollah was being decapitated, or for that matter, the Syria thing was different, but give me your take. Why the hesitancy? Because Ayatollah is the one in charge of the military, not Pezeshkian. I know a lot of people will point to him as being the moderate, but Ayatollah is the main person, right?
I think so. I'm not have a full grasp of understanding of how the politics work in Iran, but the new administration is certainly moderate and reformist, and who knows what door they open for talks. We don't know who was talking. Now that I'm looking back in hindsight, I'm saying that was definitely a hit when the helicopters fell out of the sky. Because what we have now is just a capitulative, Western-leaning guy who thinks that we can sue the UN. I think that's what he told Syria to do while it was falling, was to petition and
Are
sue
you serious?
the UN. I believe that's what he said. So yeah, we're dealing with somebody with a level of a competency that tells me that he was a plant. Like, there's just no way. Like, the whole thing is just too sketchy now that I'm looking at it. Something's not right about what happened in Iran for them to capitulate like that so easily. I've never even heard of this guy. Like, I pay attention to Iranian politics. I mean, I guess not that closely, but I've never even heard of this guy. He comes out of nowhere. He's like a farmer. He wins presidency, and he's telling Syria, while you're falling, you should petition and maybe sue the UN. It's clear that his person was put there for a reason. He's not. Something's not adding up in Iran now. And I just don't, I think that things are too uncertain for Iran to even think about entering into a hot war, a real hot war. If he can't handle True Promise 3 and retaliation in Israel, how is he going to handle a ground war? Even if he is a real president, which I'm still questioning if he is or not.
Well, the point was deterrence, and Israel has already attacked them.
Yeah, they don't have any, so it's gone.
That deterrence is relatively gone.
That's why they need the bomb. The bomb is the only thing that's going to give them deterrence at this point, because you've talked about how many ballistic missiles you have. Like, even Hezbollah was bragging about anti-ship missiles, and we can sink stuff, and like, you went under blockade within like 4 days. Like, calm down. Like, yeah. So I think like the deterrence has been lost, and either for a country, you either need to go back into self-imposed isolation and to figure out what your deterrence is next, or you need to go onto a hot war. And they certainly were not ready to go into a hot war. And so I guess we will see another little bit of isolation from Iran while they figure out what's next. I also have a really bad feeling of dread that the Russians and the Turks were just like, you want to know what? We're just going to have to play ball with the Israelis.
Oh, Lavrov was pissed off.
I know.
I mean, he looked really upset. And apparently he gave this like really angry interview after.
Yeah, he did.
I mean, unless he's, doing a drama class, I get the sense that an 80-year-old man is not play acting. I get the sense that he was pissed. I mean, he is, right? Lavrov was going to retire. Putin asked him, like, dude, I need you. He's a great diplomat. I guess my sense, and I guess the other question has to do with Russia and Iran now. Like, when Russia, I guess, and that's why I think that this wasn't something that Russia necessarily wanted. It's one thing we had Russia, Syria, and Iran working in kind of an axis of sorts as a bulwark against Israeli expansion, but mainly U.S. expansion, especially in regards to any kind of attack on Iran. The deal between Russia and Iran most likely was going to be some kind of security agreement. I have no idea what's going to be in that agreement now, especially considering they seem to be squaring up on Iran. Like, it's bad. Like, it's not just chaos for the Syrians who are now being dragged through the streets, or the cab driver being stabbed, or, the people being killed. It's not just that. It's the entire region is in fundamental chaos. Yeah. What happens to Iraq? And this is a lot of questions. I'm sorry. Let's go to the first one. The security agreement between Russia and Iran, has that been affected by what happened in Syria, if that makes sense?
I don't think so, because nothing has happened to Iran proper. Nothing has happened to Iran within her borders, or nothing has been done to Iran's sovereignty. Just PR and image control for now. So no, I don't think that affects the agreement at all. And I think it will continue. I just don't. I have to find out, research myself, how much power this president, how the divisions of power work in Iran, so we can figure out who can do what. But I just don't foresee it affecting it. If they were to affect that alliance, Iran would effectively be alone, because China doesn't care what happens to Iran.
But I think China does. I mean, doesn't
China
get like 90% of its oil from Iran or something? Or Iran gives 90% of its oil to China?
They can also get it through Russia via India. I mean, like, that's how China is. They're like, well, we'll figure it out. Yeah. And I hate China for that, but like, China's very much like, if we do nothing, like, nothing will happen to us. And that's
they're very pragmatic. They're not the most, it's like, we just want win-win relationships. We don't want to, go into your politics. We just want win-win.
Exactly.
Wow. So from your point of view, okay, so is Russia shut out of the Middle East? I guess with the exception of Iran, the answer is yes.
I think so, especially in terms of how much at least perceived influence Bashar gave the Russians in that region. I mean,
Right.
even amongst Arabs, it's very well. Russia's in charge of. Russia has Syria. It's basically like, and I'm like, well, they're kind of not really, like, they're only in 2 provinces, but okay. But that's the idea, Iran and Russia have Syria,
Right.
so they've been effectively pushed out of the region. The thing is that people are not so much in Syria or in regard to Syria, but in other places other than Afghanistan, maybe from remnants, people are quite friendly to Russia. So for them to build up Middle Eastern relations, I mean, when I went to Russia, I didn't meet any Syrians. I only met Iraqis, and they were excited to be there. So maybe there's relations developing in other areas. So, but for now, yeah, I think this is a huge black mark. And you're right. Russia's now in the Middle East at the whim of the people in the Middle East. Those warm water ports are there only until the Middle East allows them to be. And that's a precarious place to be in, especially after the very long historical relationship that they've had with Syria. The USSR had a relationship with Syria. It's quite sad. So I don't know. It's very uncertain future.
That's kind of my point. Well, I'm saying this is not necessarily something that Russia wanted.
No.
Because I think, do you think that ultimately what the U.S. is thinking that this is going to collapse? And when it collapses, it's going to give us a reason to go into Syria. Either it collapses into chaos, in which case chaos is kind of the point, or we can eventually install the regime that we want in Syria, taking this off meaning from the U.S.'s point of view, we get to stop Hezbollah from getting weapon and aid from Syria, but we also get to take this out of the hands of the Russians, who have effectively been in line with Syria, like you said, going back to the Soviet Union. Like, that's a massive geopolitical change. For example, what do you think the state is going to end up being allied with? I mean, right now it seems like they have this kind of tacit alliance with Israel, where they gave over all of this territory for the aid and assistance that they were getting from the U.S. and from Turkey, and for that matter, from Israel itself. I guess my thought is, who do you think they're going to be allied with? Do you think Russia is going to be able to make agreements with the new government that's coming into place? Or do you think that's going to be off the table? Or right now, it's just too early to know?
Russia has said they're willing to work with them, as much as I hate them. But there's also no government to really work with. So that's also kind of like we'll throw you a bone. There's really no one to work with anyway. Yeah, we'll work with whomever. But I don't see a state emerging out of this. Not in the way that we've known Syria. Sure, there might be an American portion, but I foresee Israel's already taken the Golan Heights. They're not going to leave. They'll blow themselves up before they leave the Golan Heights. We now know what the objective was. It's to capture southern Lebanon and the Golan, and Lebanon will go over to the French and the Americans. In terms of Syria, I really think that the Turks are in the driver's seat here. They have a huge amount of geopolitical leverage. They're also a member of NATO. What's America going to do? Bomb them? They can't. Right. So the America's kind of stuck up in this northeastern quadrant. Russia's kind of stuck up in this northwestern one. And then you have Israel kind of coming up from the south and the Turks coming down from the north. And I really believe that the Turks will be the decider. I know that the Israelis really want to be some kind of Kurdish state. I highly doubt that the Turks will allow that close to their border. But I do foresee that the Turks are very much in the driver's seat. And what I'm foreseeing is not good. It's a Muslim Brotherhood type mafia run state like Egypt was before Sisi became the leader. Right. So I don't think that there will be much of a state in terms of what we recognize as one afterwards, not for the foreseeable future. But I do think that Russia retains some of its power because of that northwest quadrant, and because they have I don't want to say good, but they have a funny relationship with Turkey that makes it a good relationship. They're a good sparring partner with Turkey. And I think Turkey
enemies. Yeah.
Turkey kind of appreciates it.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. I mean, like, from my understanding, when Erdogan was almost deposed, Russia gave him a heads up that, hey, buddy, they're trying to take you out. Because from Russia's standpoint, despite the fact that we're frenemies, I would prefer the devil that we know as opposed to the devil that we know. Yeah.
Russia does stuff like that where it's like, I'm throwing you this really quick favor. Don't forget it.
Throwing you this bone, just let you know.
It was a very small gesture, but it saved Erdogan's regime for another 6 years, at least minimum 7 years now. So that's a huge sort of, and there was the shooting down of the plane, and Russia in that instance because everybody says, oh, Russia didn't do anything because, Westerners want this big military spectacle. Russia actually just say, well, you want to know what? We're just not going to let Russians go on vacation there. And it crippled the Turkish economy like it wasn't. So there's still buttons and means of leverage that Russia has over Turkey, but I do foresee the Turks as the biggest winner in this, hands down. And I think that we forget because we're living in the present moment, but this stuff has happened throughout history. This is just another iteration of the Ottoman Empire, which is what Turkey wants anyway. But this is just those, like, people have to look at it. They're like, oh, the Ottoman Empire is gone. We don't really do irredentism or going to get territory anymore. It's like, no, yes, we do. They still care. So yeah.
We do. I mean, Israel has been taking territory for the last, year at least.
People understand.
Going back in the last 70 years.
When we say, like, we're in World War III, that they now understand that we are in World War III. We are seeing the rebirth of, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but the rebirth of the Turkish Empire. We have a complete, like, information political war going on in the former Soviet Union, in Georgia, Romania, even Serbia to a degree. Turkey just deployed more troops to Kosovo. Like, do people not understand what we're kind of watching in front of us?
Wow. I want to hit the Romania thing for a moment, real quick, but I want to hit Russia one more time first. Where are they in the war? I mean, so many other events have been taking the limelight, basically have been drawing attention that we've kind of ignored the fact that Russia has been making massive gains in the war. And that Zelensky apparently has said no to the lowering the draft age. Thankfully, I don't necessarily know why you need to send 18-year-olds to die in a losing war.
We do. That's why. If we do it, you got to do it.
Right. And that's what the U.S., that's what they're pointing out. Just give us the weapons. Just give us the weapons. And we'll do the job if that job can be done. How do you think Trump is going to deal with this? Trump has apparently called for a ceasefire. Of course, that's going to be ignored.
Can I say something really racist?
Please.
They want the war to end where the white people are killing the white people. Like, that's a hard war for them to watch. You have the Republican conservatives that have been harping on this Christian thing. Why are Christians killing Christians for the Jews? I mean, Trump doesn't think that way, but still, that's the harder conflict to stomach because it's white people killing white people in Europe. It's not brown people killing brown people in Syria. We're used to that. Like, it's like, so Trump has an interesting cultural and obviously economical. Trump isn't very heavily invested or interested in Ukraine like the Bidens were. So for him, I think that a lot of it is like, what is the point of this? Why are these kids killing each other? And then he's so much more familiar and well-versed, and his hatred is much stronger for Iran and that whole region. So it's kind of, I just see a huge pivot and Russia being really given the keys to do whatever they want, even though they've been really just doing whatever they want anyway, honestly.
I know, but any attack on Iran, if Iran ends up signing a security guarantee with Russia, wouldn't that by definition bring in Russia into that conflict? Meaning, even if he pulls back the lever on the Ukraine issue, the fact that Iran and Russia are going to sign some kind of security guarantee, they haven't necessarily released it yet. And, with the North Korean one, it ended up being a military security guarantee. Like, I will fight for you, you will fight for me, that kind of guarantee. I don't know if that's what they're going to sign for Iran, but if it's anywhere near that, then that immediately put Russia back in the crosshairs with the U.S. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't see a hot war. No, as a former military member, a hot war with Iran on the ground would be an enormous mistake.
Right.
I mean, Trump should not engage in that unless he really wants a huge failure. The failure in Ukraine is enough. We can stomach that, and we can kind of twist it to say maybe it really wasn't a failure. Maybe the EU actually failed. If we go into a hot war with Iran, the failure and the loss will be tremendous. And I just don't. Them doing an air campaign on Iran is one thing, but to what end? You bomb some things and that's it. You're not going to go in. You're not going to follow up on that. And then, that's kind of the end of it. If we see a shock and awe campaign of just airstrikes against Iran, that will turn the entire international community against the United States anyway. And they can't fight a hot ground war with Iran. There's no way. Iran has 7 million volunteers. We have like 300,000 or something. Yeah. Like, it's just not. they could arm them with swords and they'd win. So you're not going to get into a hot war. I think that Russia would be okay, but I also don't foresee their agreement being as militaristic as North Korea. They don't need the sort of defense that North Korea necessarily does.
I see. Okay, so I think thought is Iran is going to get nukes at some point. I mean, they're going to have to for their own personal security, especially since their first line of defense have collapsed. Russia is going to keep their bases for now, maybe even at the leisure of Turkey, because, hashtag Erdogan and played his cards right. He's a wildly, slimy somebody, but he is competent. He keeps getting away with the stuff, so he's going to keep doing it. Russia is still killing it in Ukraine. They're moving towards their objective. Ukraine seems to be getting weaker in that context. I want to move to Europe. Europe is fascinating to me because you get the president. Well, he's not the president. He should be the president of Romania at this point. Comes out with a video effectively saying, we shouldn't destroy we shouldn't destroy democracy in Europe. And it's like, dude, they don't want you, man. Like, they literally killed the like you were on your way to winning the election, and they called a retrial in this country on from the standpoint of the court. What do you think happened with this? I mean, they are arguing, and I think it's absurd because the same argument was made in the United States, that TikTok videos was the rationale for them to kill and destroy the election that this guy was going to win. And this guy just so happened to be a Eurosceptic of the batch and was going to win in spades. And look, the reason he was going to win is obvious, right? I'm not going to send your kids to die in a war that we don't need to fight. Full stop. This is not something we need to do. I'm not going to be involved in it. Europe comes out and argues that the only way you could be a democracy is if you join and get closer to the European Union, which is just outrageous, right? You get the other situation in Georgia where they are trying hand over fist to knock over their government. They're doing everything in their power to knock over their government. Vucic, I always pronounce his name wrong. Vucic. The one in Serbia. Yeah. Is that right? Serbia? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Serbia, right. He points out that we're not, effectively, this is not going to be another Maidan. In fact, like echoing the same thing that's coming out of the Georgian government at this point. Is there a full court press that Europe is just applying to these leaders in order to try to force these leaders to be in line? Like, how much power or control does Europe exert on the very nations in Europe? What are your thoughts?
I think we're seeing a good power struggle between the EU and the States, kind of seeing like how much power can we exercise autonomously? How much power does the EU really have over us? Romania is sick of immigrants, is sick of EU policies. They're sick of, and this guy, I don't really know a lot about this guy because it tells you how much he came kind of out of nowhere. And we have people in Romania that are not living there, but that go in and out of Romania, and they go back and forth from Serbia to Romania on the team. So we usually have a good idea what's going on. This guy came out of nowhere. He's not even popular in Russia. So this kind of idea that like Russia was pushing him is kind of wild. Russia also doesn't understand TikTok. They really don't. So this is really strange to me. He was against the base, the newest, hugest in Europe, NATO base. In Rome, it was going to be in Romania. It's also build a massive military base in Romania, right? Yeah, it's also somehow become a hub for Ukrainian supplies. So it's constantly like has that sort of fear that it could be either attacked or implicated. They have the issues with Moldova right there and Transnistria, which Romania is fine with reunification of Moldova as long as it doesn't include Transnistria. These are all things that the EU hates. They're normal things. It's just that, and then this guy comes in and he's like a raving nationalist, and he also wants those things. But it's easy to just say, oh, he's a Nazi, because Romania has that creepy sort of nationalist Nazi past. So, and we have what's going on in Georgia. There are so many things at play here, and the main message that I'm getting out of the whole thing is that we're going to do what we want to you. How that plays out is how that plays out, but we're going to do it with no repercussions. So if you watched, and you mentioned Serbia, Serbia had their own political turmoil earlier this year. We actually just did a Twitter space on it. We did a Twitter space on their previous color revolution and then the turmoil this year. But Putin alerted Vucic to a coup.
Cool. Yeah.
And so that was prevented. And immediately following that fake coup or prevented coup, foiled coup, the people were out in the street protesting something else that had nothing to do with the coup. It had to do with a lithium mine. But if you watched, they started to take a turn to where they were like against the government. And I was like, that's what they were going to use for their color revolution. It was going to be a coup at one point and the lithium mine protests. So the same thing is happening in Russia and Georgia. And the same thing may happen in Romania. But I just don't see that reaction coming from the people.
It came from the courts.
Right. But the people, see, in Georgia, this color revolution isn't getting hold. The people are like, why would we, what? And so that's kind of what's happening in Romania too. But the thing is that now the fact that the people are like, we know what you're doing. The United States has been like, well, then we're not going to hide anything. Like they're just going right to the balls to the wall. So, but I think that there's a power struggle between these states, and it kind of started by Hungary. Orban kind of saying like, look what I could do without kind of telling you, and all right, then I won't go under the auspices of the EU. I'll go under Hungary. And so then the Slovakian PM gets almost killed. You know, like all of these things happening, and these are all the Eastern Bloc states, and they all kind of stick together and have decent relations because they sort of have to. And so they see all this, the writing's on the wall. I mean, the EU is doing everything they can to destabilize and get back into that former Soviet bloc under the guise that Russia has like undual influence in there. They really don't, but but under that guise. So yeah. Also, what also fears me, and sorry to keep going on, is what also scares me is that they want to lower the age in Ukraine. That tells me they're running out of people. What are they doing to these other states? Do they think that they're going to throw these kids into the war against Russia? They're the former Soviet bloc, right? Fight for your freedom. Russia came and got Ukraine. They're going to come back and get you too. You'll be in the Soviet Union again. Now we have new proxies.
Yeah, I think what they wanted when they realized Ukraine was losing, that they wanted a second front from Georgia.
Exactly.
It just so happened he came out very clearly. This will not be a Maidan 2.0 or Maidan 2.0.
You're not going to try to say his name.
What is his name? Yeah, I wasn't even going to go there. I butchered his name so bad. I just the prime minister of this country. He like, it's wild to me that Ukraine has become, I don't want to call it a meme, but it becomes something that they can identify with Maidan 2.0. Like this is not going to be us. This is not going to be a rerun of this.
Because Georgia had their own color revolution called the Rose Revolution, and they still don't say this is going to be the Rose Revolution again. They say this is Maidan 2.0, which tells you what a disaster the Maidan was, and that nobody wants to end up like this.
I mean, I don't know who the hell would want to send their kids to war in this way, especially for something. I find all of this to be a catastrophe in all of these places, and it's like they are arguing that democracy means that we must ignore democratic order within the context of these countries. And that's not what it means. I'm sorry. When they're making this argument, like when the guy, Rutt, was making this argument that, we need to move closer because that's what democracy means. It's like, dude, that's not what democracy means. You can be your own sovereign country and not be a part of the EU at all. Full stop. But they don't seem to quite get that. From your take, how do you think, I guess just to put a bow on it, we're coming to the end of the hour. How do you think this ultimately shakes out in Syria? I mean, like, do you think it collapses? Do you think they will be able to keep the state together?
No, I don't foresee the state
staying. It collapses.
It's collapsed pretty much already. I think that we're playing with ourselves, saying like, "Oh, they're trying. There's a transitional government. The government's collapsed." If there was, if you've watched what Israel's bombing, it's bombing. They say, "Oh, they're bombing just the military installations," which I agree with. Obviously, strategically, you have to. They're also bombing like the scientific research centers and saying that they were chemical weapons research centers or they were researching things that are unsavory. And so they're bombing universities, institutions. The people on the ground are actually killing a lot of the academics that they don't like of other, which is normal. I mean, I hate to say, like, I'm not saying that it's not good. It's good. I'm just saying that it's very normal for them to literally behead the intelligentsia when something like this happens. So this is the collapse of the state. This has like that sort of rape of the land theme as much as you possibly can. I mean, they're killing priests, they're looting churches, and while Israel's bombing all of the state institutions, it's almost exactly like Yugoslavia, but worse. It's much worse. It looks like, and I said it last night in a Twitter post, because there was let me see if I can find it. Syria's new government has announced it will move away from a state-controlled economy to a free market model to attract investment. And that doesn't tell you everything that you need to know.
I know, but who the hell is going to invest in a terrorist state? Right?
That too, but that's the point. There will be no terrorist state. There's that whole like the rebel thing, like that's a fantasy that they're just kind of letting them play. Go do your thing, fight with each other, go cause chaos. Israel's going to bomb and take the land that they need. We're going to go fight with the Kurds. You guys do whatever you want in central Syria while this whole thing falls apart. We'll go do what we want. That's the vibe that I'm kind of getting, waiting in this weird lame duck period for Donald Trump to come in, because there's a lot of even in the international community, they all kind of say the same thing. Things are definitely going to change when Donald Trump comes in. So for now, they're kind of getting their ducks in a row, or maybe the opposite, getting their ducks into like chaos for when Donald Trump comes in. But the state has collapsed for all intents and purposes. There's nothing left to defend the state or the integrity of it. They don't have a constitution and they don't have air defense. So what's defining the state of Syria?
Last question. Do you think Israel should really be all that comfortable here? I mean, it's one thing when they were arming one group against the next. Okay, that makes sense. That's just, you create destabilization. It's not that they back one group or the other. They don't like any of them. They think all of them are animals, right? But do you think they're safe in this situation? I mean, they literally just put in a terrorist state.
Yeah.
And the Muslim Brotherhood is the same Muslim Brotherhood that they're fighting Hamas. Like, certainly, it doesn't seem to take much. It's like a tick away from going after the state of Israel also, especially since it's expanded into Syria at this point. Give me your thoughts. This will be the last question.
With what? That's the thing. Like they've all been cut off at the knees completely. Hezbollah has no restock road. Israel has bombed all of the assets in Syria, even the ones that were left behind by the other forces. They've bombed all of them. So what are these people going to fight Syria with? Who will arm this group? Nobody is going to arm them anymore. I mean, they were armed, sure, by the CIA in Turkey, but they don't have any. Yeah, they don't need them anymore. So nobody's going to make deals with the rebel state. They're just going to kill them. Just like they're not going to take them seriously. I highly doubt it'll be in Afghanistan where we replace the Taliban with the Taliban. I think that it will be much more. There's other actors that are much more. You're looking at a Libya, which is worse because Libya still functions as a slave market narco state.
Sarah Bils, man, this
ending
is
on a high note.
A dark day. I swear, this is a dark conversation.
You have to laugh because you already know how it's going to play out, and if you don't laugh, you're just going to cry. It's just, as soon as I saw the writing on the wall, I said, "This is going to be Libya and Iraq had a baby."
I was thinking the exact same thing. I was thinking this is going to be Libya all over again. We've played this before. This has been done before. When John Kirby said these are the birthing pains. Yeah, he knows exactly what's going to happen. He knows it's going to devolve, it's going to collapse, and it's going to allow Israel to expand further into it, or for that matter, the U.S. to come up with a reason to get involved with its proxies, whatever, in order to create the state that it wants. That was my thought. Sarah, thank you for this. I really appreciate you on this.
Thanks for your patience with me being late and disheveled. Thank you so much.
You are not disheveled. You're perfectly fine. Thank you very much. Thank you. Sarah Bils, she's an independent journalist, U.S. Navy veteran, and co-founder of DD Geopolitics. Check her out on YouTube. She puts out really good content. Thank you for this.
You're welcome. Enjoy the rest of your week.